Hello and welcome to the Cozy Design Studio. My name is Nick and I like to chat about all things cozy. Today we're taking a look at the recently released Tales of the Shire, the latest attempt at a video game set in Tolkien's fantastical Lord of the Rings universe. Before we get into that though, if you find that you like this video and want to see more like it, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring the bell. It really helps out the channel, but it also lets YouTube know that you like this kind of stuff. But now with that out of the way, let's get into the video. We're going to start out with some background on the landscape that this game is releasing into, and the expectations implicit in that. There have been many attempts at adapting the Lord of the Rings into the video game format, some more successful than others, but on the whole it's not exactly a pretty picture. Most of the games that attempt the adaptation are just kind of meh, and wind up falling into the dollar bin at your local game store. And honestly, that's kind of the case for most adaptations of Tolkien's work. Most of the movie adaptations before the Peter Jackson era absolutely flopped, and that's why Tolkien and his estate simply didn't license anyone to make a movie for a long time. And many people thought Tolkien's books were simply unadaptable, much like Dune. If you want to learn more about the movie side of these failed adaptations, I highly recommend Jess of the Shire. She does a great job exhaustively covering the history of all these movies and just Tolkien stuff in general, so go check her out if you're interested in that. All we need to know, though, for the sake of this video, is that most attempts at adaptations failed, and until Peter Jackson, the Lord of the Rings really was stuck on the page. However, after the explosive success of the Jackson movies, it didn't take long for games to catch on. Now, I should be clear, there have been games set in the world of the Lord of the Rings since the early 80s, but until around 1992, there really weren't many new attempts made. All the games prior had maybe not been flops, but they certainly aren't the games that people talk about from that generation. However, basically immediately after the movies released in 2001, we see game companies jumping on the bandwagon yet again. And honestly, I think the world that Tolkien created makes perfect sense for video games. It's a high fantasy world with tons of extensive lore and world building and a massive community of people who absolutely lap it up. There really is no end to the video game potential in the world of the Lord of the Rings. You could have a text-based adventure, CRPG, JRPG, survival crafting, third-person action adventure, Souls-like, and even cozy life sims. The options really are endless, with the lore that's available spanning from the beginning of the universe to the end of the Third Age. There are all kinds of stories you could tell, no matter what scale you're looking for. It's so obvious, it's kind of wild that it took so long to get a Lord of the Rings game which actually stuck in the collective gaming consciousness. And please do let me know if I'm mischaracterizing the reception to these earlier games, but as far as I'm aware, even though some had fairly good critical reception, the gaming world at large didn't really lose their minds over any of these games until Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War released in 2014 and 2017 respectively. And to be clear, it's not like no one was trying before then either. If you check out the wiki for the Lord of the Rings games, you'll see an insanely long list of titles. So people were certainly trying to make it work, but much like the movie adaptations, it just didn't really seem to stick. And even the Shadow of games were mostly applauded for the Nemesis system, a mechanic where specific named orcs will build a rivalry specific to you and what you do to them. The praise is mostly about that system and not the actual game and story and all of that. And then, after we have another hiatus, the last one was 10 years, this one didn't last quite as long, but still a good 6 years, culminating in the collectively accepted wet fart of the Lord of the Rings Gollum. Now, I personally think the game got a bit more hate than it maybe actually deserved, but regardless, it wasn't exactly considered to be a very good follow-up to the hits that came, relatively right before it. So now we have a bit of a better idea of the landscape that Tales of the Shire is releasing into. A very long list of games all attempting to make something from the Tolkien franchise, with arguably all but 2 utterly failing. So it should be no surprise that the prevailing attitude leading up to the launch of Tales of the Shire was one of, let's say, skepticism. This was a new studio attempting to make a cozy life sim game set in the dangerous and dark world of The Lord of the Rings. And I mean, look at those graphics in the preview trailer. These people clearly don't know what they're doing with this game, and it's gonna be just another flop just like Gollum and all the other games before it. Well, when I heard that this brand new studio was none other than Weta Workshops, my ears certainly perked up. Now, for those of you unaware, Weta are the special effects house behind all the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies, as well as a few indie projects of their own. So while this is absolutely their first game, and making a video game is very different from making a movie, there actually are a lot of areas where these skills overlap. Now, Weta are certainly very well known for their practical prop production, and that's definitely something that doesn't directly transfer to making a video game. However, I think one of the biggest contributions that Weta gave to the movies, aside from all their VFX and prop work, is that of a cohesive aesthetic. Everything you think of when you think of The Lord of the Rings, the imagery that comes to mind, that's Weta. They basically single-handedly crafted the Hobbit aesthetic. Now, sure, there were lots of artists making absolutely stunning art before these movies, including Tolkien himself, so they weren't working with nothing. However, I don't think it's controversial to say that the idea that comes to mind when we talk about hobbits and the Shire and the Lord of the Rings in general is the work of Weta. I've been on the side of this game being good ever since the first trailer released. Obviously, I couldn't be sure because we hadn't seen any gameplay at that point, but frankly, hearing that Weta were working on it did absolutely bolster my confidence in the project. And I'm here making this video to tell you that confidence was absolutely well placed. This is, in my opinion, the best Lord of the Rings game, period. Now, if you're looking for big-scale tactical battles, or sneaking around the shadows of Mordor, or fighting orcs, this isn't that. This channel covers predominantly cozy games, so that is the lens that I'm coming to this game with. However, I also think just in general, this game gets The Lord of the Rings better than most that try. Now, I haven't played all of them, so I can't sit here and tell you that it is better than all of them. I'm sure some of the text-based adventures from the 80s were actually really good, but of the games that I have tried and that I have seen extensive coverage of, this is hands down the best. And again, that comes in large part from the fact that this was made by Weta. They perfectly capture the slow, bureaucratic, countryside life which is so crucial to the hobbits and how their society works. The hobbits, as described in The Hobbit, are, or were, a little people, about half our height and smaller than the bearded dwarves. Hobbits have no beards. There is little or no magic about them, except the ordinary, everyday sort which helps them to disappear quietly and quickly when large, stupid folk like you and me come blundering along, making noise like elephants which they can hear a mile off. They are inclined to be fat in the stomach, they dress in bright colors, chiefly green and yellow, wear no shoes because their feet grow natural leathery soles, and thick warm brown hair like the stuff on their heads, which is curly, have long, clever brown fingers, good-natured faces, and laugh deep, fruity laughs, especially after dinner, which they have twice a day when they can get it. And just as expertly and elegantly as Tolkien paints this picture of hobbits with words, Weta captures it in their game. You start off the game, much like the Fellowship of the Ring movie does, with Gandalf pulling up in his cart while you are napping on a tree branch by the side of the road. And even just with this, we get so much storytelling about the world that the hobbits inhabit. Even without knowing anything about the Lord of the Rings franchise or the surrounding world, we know that this is a safe place. As we find out, our character is on the way to the nearby town of Bywater, so basically you're a traveler on a new and strange land, and yet you feel perfectly comfortable simply falling asleep on the side of the road, not in any way concealed from other travelers on that same road. Now, anywhere outside of the Shire, you would be asking to be robbed or worse by falling asleep on the side of the road. But it's very clear that in the Shire, this isn't a concern. If you're set upon by other hobbits, it won't be to rob you of the shirt off your back, but more than likely to share a meal or strike up a conversation about some nearby neighbor and how they simply can't go on doing what they're doing. It's a disgrace to the whole town. We also learn this hobbit, like all hobbits, is by no means looking for adventure. They literally encounter Gandalf, have no idea who he is, and all they want to do is catch a ride to Bywater so they can start up their slow and entirely uneventful existence there. But once you get to Bywater, you're given the house of an old hobbit who has recently died. It's presumed that you bought it and are now moving in. Regardless, you saunter up to your new house and meet the local not-a-mailman, Orlo, and promptly are introduced to the rest of the game. So just like any other Stardew or Animal Crossing like, we'll just call them cozy life sims for the sake of brevity, but just like any of those, you have a day-night cycle, and you forage, farm, socialize, and do anything else that you might need to get done during the day, and at night you either join everyone at the local pub, or hold a dinner with some friends, or really just do anything that you want. This is where the game takes more from Stardew in its formula, and this is one of the main questions that I had in regard to the game from the beginning. How would they handle the day-night cycle? If you're unfamiliar, in Stardew Valley, you get from sunup to midnight to get everything done that you need to get done. But if you're still out of the house by the time it's about 1 o'clock, you pass out and someone has to bring you home, where you're promptly charged for the service. And that day that I just mentioned lasts, I think, about 15 minutes in real time, so how fast your year goes is dependent on how long you play the game, and between sessions, the timer stops. However, in Animal Crossing, the clock runs in real time, so 1 hour in-game is 1 hour in real time. This means that if you need to wait 5 days for something to be delivered, you have to wait 5 real-life days. So one of my big questions was how they were going to handle this aspect. Fortunately, they decided on the former, with 1 day being roughly 15 minutes. I think ultimately this was a good choice. The reason a dev might want to go with the one-to-one method, like in Animal Crossing, is to drag out the length of time that a player spends in the game, as well as to kind of force the player to be invested in the game. If they have to spend 1 real-world year playing the game to be able to get any of the cute fall decor, they're going to be far more invested than if they just have to play for like 10 hours until they get there. Now, I personally prefer the Stardew style myself. I see value in the one-to-one approach, but it definitely has the downside of needing to have a lot of content to keep you busy while you're waiting a real-world week for something to upgrade or be built or whatever it is. And it has a tendency to lead to the game feeling pretty dull towards the end of the story. It might take longer to get to that endgame, but the endgame itself, I think, feels worse than in something like Stardew. Now, that's just my opinion, and I could absolutely see how they could have made the argument that a one-to-one style would have made the game feel far more slow-paced and more in line with the life of a real-life hobbit. But I also think that is one of the major sticking points for a lot of people getting into Animal Crossing, all the waiting that you have to do. So I definitely think this was the right choice for them to make. That said, it does lead to the game feeling a bit on the frantic side. You have to make sure that you can cram everything into 1 day, which can legitimately be hard to do. But I think they do a good job counteracting that feeling by making sure nothing is really all that dire. It's never the end of the world if you can't complete a task on time or if you aren't able to make time to have a meal with a villager. You can always just reschedule or do it tomorrow. And I accidentally left this part out of the script, but the way that they kind of guide you around the map is just amazing. And it's very effective and I think pretty efficient, because they kind of take from Ghost of Tsushima, from their playbook with how they guide you around. They basically have these birds that kind of follow the path that you should be taking, and they kind of like perch and point in the right direction, which I find to just be a brilliant way to get rid of the need for like a diegetic, just painted line on the ground. I think it's just a really elegant, really smooth way of kind of guiding you around the map. And the game is full of those kinds of things. They have a similar thing with butterflies, showing you where all the foraging stuff is. So you're never really spending too much time kind of looking around. You can always kind of be subtly guided to wherever it is you need to go. But a good example of this kind of ethos is how the gardening works. There is a lot of depth to the meta of gardening in this game, with how you need to think about what crops grow well together and which don't, and how you can optimize for the best quality while also optimizing the space that they take up in the planter. So there is plenty of depth to that mechanic, but it's very much not punishing. For example, when the season turns, instead of just losing all the crops that you had planted in the last season that didn't sprout in time, like in Stardew, where they all just immediately die, instead those crops just take a little bit longer to produce. So the only thing you're missing out on is planter space, which you can always remedy by buying another planter if you really need to. Also, the way they handle removing plants, I think, follows a similar beginner-friendly mindset. In Stardew, the seeds are pretty precious at the beginning of the game because selling fruit is the main source of income that early. So if you accidentally remove a plant, the fact that they don't give you those seeds back means that you're out however much money those seeds cost to buy, but also however much the delta is between the cost of the seeds and how much the fruit would have sold for. But in Tales of the Shire, it's really not that hard to get money from foraging and fishing, and you're able to do those right away. So experimenting with farming isn't nearly as costly as it is in Stardew. Plus, the fact that all the resources respawn the next day means that no matter how much you spend, you always know you'll be able to go foraging the next day and make back a good amount, plus whatever your garden produces. But this isn't the main way that they differentiate this game from the Stardew norm. No, they do that with the game's meals mechanic. In a nutshell, this is the game's social mechanic. It's equivalent to how you increase friendship with any of the residents in Stardew, but where in Stardew you simply give a gift and talk to the person twice a day to increase friendship, in Tales of the Shire you invite them to your house for a meal made specifically how they like. And this not only does away with the very frustrating aspect of Stardew that is not having any idea what a villager wants without either brute forcing it to find out, or just looking up in their wiki entry, which I personally don't love. It just takes me out of the game when I have to look up this person on the internet like they're some kind of celebrity that I'm trying to buy a gift for. But no more. Instead, they will simply send you a letter in the mail the day of the meal and let you know what flavor they want. And even better, it's not specific to the dish. They do have favorite dishes, but they only ask for a flavor for the meal. So while you can get extra points with them if you give them one of their favorite dishes, you don't have to in order to have a successful meal. All you have to focus on to get their approval is the predominant flavor in the dish that you make. And before we move on to actually making those dishes and how that's done, I just want to say I love this mechanic. It feels so much different than any other game that I've played before. I'm sure it's shown up somewhere, but this is the first time I'm seeing it, and I love it. I really think every cozy life sim that comes after this needs to use this mechanic, and I would love to see it expanded on. It's just such a great way to make you feel actually connected to the other people in the game, and actually care about them past just whatever their wiki tells you they like. I found myself wanting to invite people to a meal, not because I wanted to increase their friendship score or get a new recipe from them, which is how you get new recipes, but because I didn't want them to get disgruntled and angry at me. Because even though that really doesn't come with any negative consequences, it just feels shitty to know that one of them is upset at you because you haven't invited them to a meal in a while. And beyond the doyalist reasoning of how it affects the player, it also makes perfect sense diegetically. In the world of the Shire, the culture is very much collectivist, and social norms and how you actually interact with everyone in the town carry a lot of weight. So it's just one more thing which I think the team over at Weta did an absolutely amazing job with. But you can't have the meal system without the equally amazing cooking system. This is one of the best cooking mechanics I've seen in one of these kinds of games. It's just the right amount of complicated, but also not so much so that it makes you dread interacting with it. In most games, you simply take a couple ingredients and click cook, and boom, the meal is done. And it's as good as the materials that you put in. Maybe you can increase the quality by using better ingredients, but there really isn't any method to all of the cooking. You just kind of add them all together and click a button. But in Tales of the Shire, you have to actually make cooking decisions. You have to decide how long you want to cut it for to get the right texture, you have to decide what spices to use and when to get the right flavor, and you have to strategically use your different cooking stations to get the dish just right. It's amazing. I actually enjoy cooking in this game, and they do a brilliant job with the vibes of cooking as well, with the countertop eventually becoming absolutely covered with different cooking equipment, all of which serves a purpose and is needed if you want to get the dish just right. And that ethos carries out into every aspect of the game. The decoration was another thing I was pretty curious about when I talked about this game before. I wasn't sure how much customization there would be, but as it turns out, there's lots. As you progress in the game, you unlock more and more ways to customize your hobbit hole. However, you really don't have to wait. Literally from the moment you're done talking to Orlo in the beginning and after you have him over for a meal, you can start customizing. I won't go over everything here, but I will just say that the level of customization you get is beyond what I ever thought they would have given us. I thought you would maybe be able to, add some decoration, maybe change the lighting, but that might be just about it. Well, I was definitely wrong with that. You can change everything from the floors to the appearance of the outside of your house. There's so much in the way of customization in this game, it's insane. And the freedom that you get is like few other games that I've ever played. Now, the layout of your house stays fixed. It would be awesome if you could do some kind of full remodel, but frankly, with how much you're able to do without having that option, I'm not missing it at all. There really are no limits. As you progress the story, you get access to different parts of the house, which are blocked off from the beginning. But even right off the start, you're given more freedom than I'm used to in these kinds of games. They let you do literally whatever you want. If you think a piece of furniture looks better outside, do it. You want all the rooms to have drastically different aesthetics? Go for it. And the tools they give you to make all that possible are frankly class leading. You can choose whether you want to change the trim or wallpaper or lighting only for one place or for the entire house, and you can place decorations anywhere that you want, either on a strict grid or with much smoother rotational control. Now, I would love to see something like a custom design feature like in Animal Crossing to let us get really crazy with it, but as far as I know, that's not really part of the game right now. Though I haven't gotten that far, so I really don't know what features there are just waiting to be unlocked. Regardless though, I am more than satisfied with the level of customization you get for your house, and even if they don't add any other style or color options than the ones that you get at the start of the game, I'm good with it. No complaints here. They give you more than enough variety right from the start, and that freedom carries over to your character as well. I know some people might turn their noses up at this feature, but I personally really love it. They don't lock you into one specific character design, so that means there really is no stress to getting your hobbit just right at the beginning of the game, because right from the very start, you're able to just hop into the wardrobe and change everything from the body style to the accessories that you wear. Overall, this game is really defined by its sense of freedom and player choice while still keeping you firmly in the world of the Shire. Everything is designed so incredibly thoughtfully, in keeping with the aesthetic that Tolkien had in mind when writing the books. I read an interview with some of the team, and they talked about how they made sure not to stick strictly to the movie design choices, but to pull from the books and Tolkien's own life experiences as well to make sure that they made the world as close to what Tolkien would have considered cozy as possible. And I just love seeing that kind of thought put into games, especially cozy games, which I think tend to get a bit of a reputation for being a bit slapdash and superficial with how they evoke that cozy feeling. And while I personally don't necessarily agree with that, I do love to see just how much thought and effort clearly went into making sure this was as quintessentially English cozy as possible, and pulling inspiration from the things that Tolkien would have had around growing up to get that cozy, cottagey feeling. If you're looking for a cozy, cottagecore life sim with just a hint of that Tolkienian magic that you just can't quite get anywhere else, I cannot think of a better game to play than Tales of the Shire. I'm sure there will be plenty of mainstream outlets which talk about just how disappointed they were by this game because it didn't have this or that from the movies, or it name drops too much, or whatever it is they say. But to me, this will always be one of the best examples of a cozy life sim, on par with classics in the genre like Stardew and Animal Crossing. And if any of this has sounded at all appealing to you, a $35 price tag is absolutely insane for what you're getting here, and I can't recommend it higher. But that's just about all we have time for today. This video is already getting a bit on the longer side, so thank you so much for sticking with me this far. I hope you've at the least found this video informative, and I hope if you decide to pick up this game that you let me know down in the comments what you think about it, and if you agree with my analysis of it. But don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a video. If you would like to support me and what I do here, you can join the channel and get access to a private Discord chat with myself and any of the other wonderful channel members. But if you can't afford that or just don't want to, I totally understand, and I appreciate you just watching this video. Other than that though, I'll just say thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, happy gaming.